not trying to be funny, but this has been the longest reading month in 2025, and we're only in February, and we know it's been 27 days. Tomorrow will make 28. But I'm ready for March. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for March. And see, I knew I would set myself up because I chose in my TBR, if you go watch my February TBR video, I chose 7 books to read, and I knew, I was like, I'm not going to get to all 7 because the books I chose to read were just way too long, okay? So instead of 7, I only read 5 books this month. Technically still reading the last one, but we'll be finished by tomorrow, okay? All right, so in this video, I'm going to go over the 5 books that I read and give my in-depth review and what I'm rated the books, okay? And so we can close this out. We can close out this month and get to a new month, okay? All right, beautiful people, if you are new here, I am Darnaya Darice, first name, middle name. On this channel, I do lifestyle motivation and bookish content, so we do all of the things, but I hope you, from any videos that I make, be encouraged, be inspired, be uplifted, and empowered to continue to grow, learn, and succeed, okay? All right, so without further ado, let's get into the 5 books that I read for February. I don't know what I was thinking, but the first 3 books that I chose from my TBR, because I just put the books that I wanted to read in the jar. I put about 12 books in there, or not in the jar. I typed up the titles and put them in a bowl and then picked them out. And I said, okay, I'm gonna pick 7, but I know I'm probably gonna only get to between 4 and 6 probably. And so I got to 5, okay? And the first 3 were just too long. So the first book I read in February was The Reformatory. I'm sure you've heard of this from many other booktubers. This is by Darnaya. This was over 500 pages. This took me a week and a half to finish in February. And I was like, girl, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? I'm thinking I'm going to get through this. Like, okay, I gave myself 4 to 5 days. I normally read, it takes me about 2 to 3 days to read a book, or that's what it was like in January, right? And sometimes if I'm just reading, it's a low read day where I only read like between 20 and 50 pages, then it may take me 4 days. But this, I was like, oh, I'll give myself 5 days at the most. Girl, brother, this took so long to read, but it was such a good story. I was just ready for it to end. I'm glad it ended on a happy note. I did give it a 5-star. This is my second 5-star read. If you go back to my January wrap-up, you'll see that my first 5-star read was S.A. Cosby, Razor Blade Tears. The story, the complexity of writing was just immaculate, and so was this. The writing, the storytelling, the plot, the characters, like I felt like I was living through the characters. Or is that? The second book I read was Real by Kennedy Ryan, and Real was another read. I know in my last video, I did a whole video on Real. The video I did on Real, I gave it a 4.5 overall, but a 5-star in the category of romance specifically. And I'm just updating that rating to 5 stars. This was another long one. This took me a while to finish, but I did not want this story to end. Like I got to page 400. And I didn't want the story to end. So that's how you know it's a great read. I know there's so many other ladies who are reading this book, who have got this book for their TBRs, some in March and some even this month. And I encourage you to read it. It's such a great romance. I love how Kennedy Ryan, so far from what I read with her, this is my first read from her. And I'll show you the second book that I read from her this month. But she wrote Cannon Holt. She writes from 2 perspectives. I love that it's from the first point of view. Darnaya again wrote from the perspective of the sister and the brother in this, so I did like that. But you get the female and male version of the romance and how they went about life, but it's so much more than romance because it gets into healing, sickness, family issues, and how to resolve them. But the men she writes, it's easy to read. So, you know, that's why I initially didn't necessarily rate it a 5, because the complexity of writing for S.A. Cosby and Tanana Redo was just, it's so complex and so superb. But this deserves 5 stars. I'm sorry, just in period. It was more than a romance. The men I love that she wrote a strong black man who loved the lady he was with. He knew what he wanted. He had a great career. He was steadfast. He was confident. Just how he loved and sought after Neve throughout their ups and downs or trying to navigate the acting world. He was the director and she was the actress, and he gave her opportunity to be in one of his groundbreaking films. But please read this. I'm not going into so much detail because I did a whole video on this one, but it was long. So when I say February's been a long month, it's because the books have been long. Now, the third book I read was Evan Winter. This was The Rage of Dragons. This was a long book. Like, I had to keep going to the back because he has a glossary in this book. I had to keep going to the back of it to see what some of the words were or what he meant, because it has its own lingo, you know. And it's a great story. For me, it was more so like a 3.75, because I'm not a fantasy reader. This is literally my first fantasy book. I jumped and dived in, you know. I got warned by other booktubers, but I jumped and dived in. It's not a bad story at all. If you are a fantasy reader and you like the magical world or the dragons and all the things, gifts and talents that, you know, goes there, this will be a great read, because it follows the story of the Omahi people, and the main character is Tao, and he goes through a lot in this book. I read it actually with the audio, through Audible, and I followed for half of the book, and then I stopped and just did the audio, because that's the best way to read the series. So excited. This is the second read by her. This is a 4-star read. This was another very good story. As I said, Kennedy Ryan writes the male figures in this book, the husbands, the boyfriends, so well. She puts black men in a great light in how they treat the woman they're with. This is another one that follows the male and the female. So it flips back and forth from their point of views, their perspectives. And you have Yasmin and Josiah in this one. And Yasmin is starts out as a confident woman. She's married. In this book, they were married young, basically in their younger adult years, and they ended up having 2 children. Unfortunately, they had one that did not make it. I don't want to spoil it too much if you haven't read it, but I know many of you have already been hit to Kennedy Ryan, okay? But, you know, so that sends that, along with Josiah's aunt passing, who his parents were passed in a car accident, or were killed in a car accident when he was younger. So he had his aunt, and then she ended up passing, and then it just caused a lot of turmoil. It was hard to get through the marriage. It was grief. They each handled their grief differently. Yasmin went into depression. Josiah went into being a workaholic and kind of making it, in Yasmin's point of view, like, hey, you need to get up. What are you doing? We have 2 other children to live for, things of that nature. She advertises or advocates for therapy, and he was all against it, and so she ended up wanting the divorce. And they by the end of the book, they find their way back together. He ends up going to therapy. The son ends up going to therapy. You know, they have this restaurant that is thriving. It's a luxury restaurant, and they were co-parenting and things, but they couldn't resist the love. You know, when you, especially with your first love, your first husband, you've been married to this person so long, you have that affection, you working together, co-parenting well. I did love that she highlighted that. It wasn't that type of book where they didn't get along, they were fussing every 2 minutes after the divorce and things like that. No, they did well, they handled themselves well, but that attraction, that love for each other couldn't resist. It's like being in the room and you know, like, oh, are these people going to get back together eventually? And the last book I read was The Personal Librarian. This is by Mary, where I'm getting married from? Marie Benedict, Victoria Christopher Murray. And I'm almost finished this. I'll be finished this by tonight or tomorrow. This book, I am enjoying this book. It's historical fiction. I'm looking to give it between a 3.75. It's about a 3.75 for me. The book, it does go kind of up and down in like 1 minute it's like, oh, it's getting juicy, it's getting good. And then it kind of goes to like, oh, okay, it's a good read. I want to finish it. But it goes on these up and downhill for me as far as emotions. But I love the story. You learn so much. I don't agree with the actions of the mother because it does it follows a husband and wife. Richard Theodore Greener, if you don't know him, look him up because he's actually a real person, Belle Marion Greener, or Belle DaCosta Green, was a real people. And the mother Genevieve was a real person. And he was the father, Richard, was a scholar. He fought for black rights, black equality. But the mom, she was a fleet and lived in DC, but she listed the family as being white, and she wanted to, hey, in order to escape the trials and tribulations that black people have been going through at the time, I want to move us to a different location. I want us to, because they were fair pale people, they could pass as white. I want to raise our family as white. And the father was not up for that, which I agree. Because nothing changes unless you help to change it, you know? And the self-deprecation, the self-hate, you see those themes and issues in this book. But what I do love is that the daughter who lives, Belle, who's JP Morgan's personal librarian, she does contemplate. She goes through this inner battle of wanting to be herself, but also wanting to show, like, if I live this way, I have a better life. I can give more money to my family, because she's kind of taking care of the family with the money she has from JP Morgan. She's doing well. She's articulate. She has great knowledge in the art world and books and things, but it's classical books, you know? So I do see where it highlights more so her focusing on European classical works and being, you know, knowing different languages or learning different language because she's studying on her own there, but not so much in her own culture. And so that's another thing that leads to making that decision. But I love that she also kind of in her own way shows that, no, even though I am living as a colored girl, at the time, that's what she used in this book, okay? She shows that I am smart, I'm articulate, I'm astute, I have knowledge, I can negotiate. There's a lot of negotiations that she negotiated of private collection pieces and pieces that are limited or rare. And so it also talks about abortion in this book, because she ended up getting involved with some white men. She ends up starting to smoke and drink. The girl, she's girling, but she's like, I'm grown, I can navigate life and I can make my choices. But the mom kind of struggles, like, did I make the right choice to do this? It doesn't seem like she necessarily wanted to negate the black side, but her whole thing was about giving her children a better life. And unfortunately, she decided that them denouncing who they are, changing their last name, was that way, but she still loved the husband. The husband went on to, and if you look up Richard Greener, he really did go to Russia. He served some time there. The Chinese government honored him. He does have a 9-foot statue in South Carolina to this day that was made in 2018. He has an honorary degree from from Howard, because for doctorate of law. He actually he was the first black U.S. person, the first black American who graduated from Harvard College in 1870. So W.E.B. Du Bois was the first black person to graduate with a PhD from Harvard, but Richard Greener was the actual person who just graduated, was the first graduate period of Harvard College in 1870. So go look him up. It's such good nuggets in here that Maria and Victoria gives for extra learning beyond this book, and that's what I do love. But it is more so on the 3.75 as far as this story goes. I'll see how it ends. Like I said, I'm going to finish this either tonight or tomorrow. But that's what I read in here. And I'm trying to think, is there anything else that I wanted to highlight? Because I can go so deep in these books with highlighting the parallels and things of that nature. But the writing is so easy to read here. I love it's a really flow. It's short chapters. The chapters aren't that long, so you can flow through this book pretty easily if you have time. It could be a one-sit read, honestly, if you on a weekend day. That's how easy it is to read this book. So I do love that. I will check out more of Victoria's work as well. I know she has Harlem Rhapsody out, and along with other books. So, I do want to check out more of her works. So it was a great reading month. Besides the Rage of Dragons, it's just fantasy. I don't know. Maybe I'll try another fantasy read, but I'm not really into fantasy. But historical fiction, romance, nonfiction, when you're dealing with personal development, financial growth, success, mindset, things of that nature has been hidden. But I think my favorite book of this month will be Real, hands down. My favorite. So I had 2 5-star reads, and this is out of those, this is my absolute favorite of the month. So let me know, what are you reading, or what did you read for February? If you are a content creator or booktuber, I try to watch everyone's videos from the small to the largest, to support. And so I'm excited to see what you all read, your reviews on those books, your take on that. And so stay tuned, because I'm going to do a separate video on what's on my TBR for March, because there are 2 books that I didn't get to. I have to move that to March, and I'm excited about those books that I will be reading in March. So let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And in all that you do, all that you are, always remember to keep rising. Taking just be. Don't take it. Taking just don't be.